welcome to Tea and Games. Happy Halloween! The tea today is, once again, Salty Caramel Pumpkin Black, and I'll put a link down below in the description to Tea Runners where I got it. One of the few times of the year where I can use this mug. Technically, it's my husband's mug, but I'm the only one that uses it. Anyhow, most of the video today, I will be a disembodied voice, which is kind of appropriate for Halloween if you think about it. Sit this down. Handy dandy notebooks. I remember what I'm doing. There have been some changes at the channel. Some great stuff. I now have a new URL, TEA, N, capital N, games, small games. So the new URL is youtube.com/TEA, capital N, little GAMES. And also, and you have an @ symbol in front of the @TNGames right there in the URL. And you can also tag me, at least theoretically, tag me here on YouTube with that handle, @TNGames. I don't know if that works because they have restrictions on tagging for small channels, which is a bit of a pain in the neck for community and building community and people who have small channels communicating with each other. But there's also a restriction on having a community tab, and I don't have 500 subscribers, and yet they have unlocked the community tab for me. So that is another great thing that's happening here on the channel. I've already posted one photo, and so now I will be able to post photos in between videos, and if you subscribe to the channel, you'll see photos as well as videos. So that'll be a nice thing for times when I can't quite get in front of the camera like this. Okay. Today I want to try something different. I'm going to try to hold the camera and put it on the actual board and talk about what I'm doing and talk about a game. I started with something small and familiar. So we'll see how well this works. Most of you are familiar with Patchwork, but I don't know if you've seen the various versions of Patchwork. We don't have the original version of Patchwork. We have the Valentine's edition, which are chocolates, chocolate. And we have this Halloween edition, which has lots of fun colors and also eyeballs, which I have a tendency to make googly eyes with when I'm just not paying attention to what I should be paying attention to on the board. And there's also a Christmas edition, which has a little polyomino cookie cutter, which is kind of nifty. I'll show you that closer to Christmas time, I expect. But anyhow, a lot of people online ask, well, what's the difference with all these different versions of Patchwork? Is it the same game? And the answer seems to universally be yes, except for Halloween. So here's what's different. Okie dokie. Put this right up here where you can see. Is that in focus? Okay, you may notice a little asterisk on the square. And that asterisk means that this is one of the tiles that has been, quote unquote, rebalanced, which means either that they've made it a lot easier or a lot harder. I'm not really sure which. I have not dumped out another version of Patchwork and done a tile by tile comparison. But if you want to do that, they've made it easy for you because the tiles in Halloween, the Halloween version of Patchwork, are actually marked, a little bitty tiny mark to let you know which ones have been changed. So anyhow, let me show you some of the other things that's different. This is a reversible board. I don't know if all of them have reversible boards, but some more so than others. You have a light version, and then there is the dark version. This is the time board, which goes in the center. And we have our little pumpkin pieces. This is a 2-player game. If you're not already familiar with Patchwork, we have little pumpkin pieces which go at the beginning of the board. And we've got patches, 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 which go on the little Halloween faces on the board. And I seem to have knocked some of the patches off. Hang on. Okay, now. And the player boards come in these colors, kind of a golden, yellow, orange, and a purple with what looks honestly like wine stains, but given the Halloween theme, are probably supposed to be blood stains on them. And they too have a dark theme. Light, dark, light, dark. So you can kind of do stuff with that a little bit. And I've got all my pieces on here. So now let's see if I can get the camera on the board. So when you start, this is what it looks like. And yeah, it does take up an awful lot of table for a very small game. A very small two-player game. The starting marker is the tombstone. And it is to the left of this piece here. Here we go. And this is the board. Eyeballs represent the buttons which are on the original game. They're buttons. Okay, we're going to look at the pieces here. This is the player board. This is what you're going to try to fill up. And if you have a 7x7 grid, you get a special marker, and that gives you extra points at the end. And points are counted in eyeballs in the Halloween version. Let me just take a piece here and look at it. Oh, this is one of the rebalanced asterisk pieces here. Okay. The 0 eyeball makes this piece kind of unusual and terrific, particularly in the early part of the game when you may be just a tiny bit broke. 0 eyeballs. Eyeballs are what you use to pay. They are the currency in the game. And the 3 next to the timer means that that's how much you move on the time board. So you start off with a certain number of eyeballs and you pay the eyeballs to move. If you land on top of somebody, you get to go again. If you are moving here and you did your turn and you're still not caught up to them, you're still behind, you will get another turn until you are actually ahead of them. Every time you pass one of these eyeballs here, you get a payment. It's payday. Like down here on the board, you will have your polyomino shapes onto the board. And let's say you've got these here. And so if you passed, and that's a really bad configuration because I've got this big gap here. But if you pass that eyeball and you've got this on here, you count 1, 2, 3, you get 3 eyeballs, so it's a payday. You go around, you look at 3 tiles at a time. On your turn, you've got your choice of 3 tiles. Sometimes the tiles are going to be too expensive and you won't be able to afford to buy anything. Sometimes the tile that, you really need is going to be like not something you can afford, or the ones that you can afford are going to give you a weird shape on your board, and that's just the game. So anyhow, if you don't buy a tile and place it on your player board here, the other thing you can do is you can jump ahead of the other player, and you count the tiles that you've moved to get ahead, and you get 1 eyeball for each one of those. And then your turn is over and they take their turn. These little pieces here are extremely valuable. These are the little 1x1 patches, and they are very useful for plugging holes in inconvenient spots on your board. Whoever passes, wow, you got to go a ways here to get to the first patch. Whoever passes that first patch or lands on it, they get that patch. And it's not replenished or replaced, they just get the patch. and place it on their board immediately. So, so those are the two things you can do. You can either buy one of these patches and place it on your board, trying to jigsaw everything in so that the board is filled. You lose points for empty spaces at the end of the game. And essentially, you go around these pieces all the way around, moving like you move the little marker here. Okay, so you look at these three pieces, and maybe you take this one, and then your opponent gets to look at these three pieces here, and maybe they take this one, and then that marker moves up there, and then you look at these three pieces, and maybe you buy this one there, and then maybe he can't afford anything, so he just passes, he jumps ahead of you and picks up some eyeballs. Your turn again, same spot. You look at three pieces, the next three pieces in line, decide what, if anything, you want to do. And that's the way the game goes. And you go around, and you're not going to run out of pieces, or at least we haven't yet. So you can go around more than once. But what really determines when the game ends is this track, which is the time track. As you move along here, because each one of these pieces has a little, let me turn it right side up, see, 6, you move 6 on there because that's the time track there. And so you move along this board, and as you go around the board and you pick up the patches as you go, or your opponent does, when you get to here and you move into the middle, you get one last payday for crossing that eyeball, and then you start, and then your opponent will finish up there, and when everybody is in the center, you add everything, you add up the score. And the game is, as you can see, it's mechanically, how it plays, it's really simple. But there's all this stuff that you've got to track. You've got to look ahead, and you're looking at this piece and going like, well, I could certainly afford this, and I would move up 2, but if I'm moving up 2 here, that's, it's not gonna, if I'm here and I move 2, it's not gonna get me that payday I desperately need. Or you might say, ooh, like, I really, really need that patch because I've got a hole and I need to plug it. And you're looking at that and you're going like, well, I moved 2, it doesn't get me the patch. And all my opponent has to do, he doesn't even have to buy a thing. He just jumps ahead of me and he takes the patch, plus gets another eyeball for moving 1. Or he could buy a tile that has some time amount on it, see, 5, and he gets the patch. So you got to kind of be looking ahead, making your decisions like, what can I do? What can my opponent possibly do with the tiles that are left? What are going to be his next 3 tiles, or her? And you work your way around, and also at the same time, you are trying very, very hard to jigsaw these things in together. So you're getting all of these pieces neatly in. There's only one, something to keep in mind, there's only one of these 1x2 patches. So if you do something like that, you better be darn sure you can get that piece. And there's really not very many ways you can be darn sure of getting a specific piece, because there's always your opponent looking ahead and going like, and I'm going to snatch that one up on my next turn. But you need to fill this board in solid. And this game, because you lose points for empty spots, this game means that you can actually come up in negative points at the end of the game. And we have. So, I mean, it's like, My husband is much better at this than I am. He just has this thing where he can just slot everything in, and I'm always struggling a little bit more and making odd shapes on my board. But, you know, it's like my goal is to not end up in negative numbers at the end of the game. Our very first game, we both had negative numbers, and then we started kind of getting the hang of it. But for something that is so simple to play, all of the different things that you've got to balance, the number of eyeballs you pay, and when you get eyeballs back, like sometimes you may just want to jump ahead of somebody just so that you can pick up a couple of eyeballs for moving ahead rather than buying a patch. Or you might want to like move ahead instead of buying a patch so that you can cross that eyeball there because you've got a bunch of eyeball pieces on your board, and you need the money, you know? Otherwise, you can't buy more things to fill in this board, which is surprisingly difficult to fill. We've never filled the board all the way in, but we have gotten relatively close a couple of times. One of the things I like about this particular version of Patchwork is I really, really like the color scheme for it. It's really, I don't know, it's very colorful. The original version has very pale pastels, kind of washed out colors. It's meant to be, the name refers to like a quilt. So I didn't get the original version of Patchwork. This was actually the first Patchwork I got because I just liked the way it looked. So colorful, so cheerful, so fun. This game is sometimes not fun. I mean, sometimes it is really hard. It's like we're just kind of looking at each other going like, because we don't play it very often. We just look at each other and go like, wow, I kind of forgot how brutal this game can be. Because you're just sort of struggling to make all the pieces fit, and you're struggling to get the number of eyeballs in to pay and eyeballs out, and picking up those patches to fill gaps and figuring out where you can move and what you can afford and what your opponent is probably looking at. And, you know, it's like, well, if I get this one, I will move ahead one. But if I get this one, I get time 5 and I get 3 eyeballs. That's really a much better deal. But this one gives me 3, but I get no eyeballs on this one. And I really want a few more eyeballs on my board for when the payday comes around. Because though it looks like there are a lot of eyeballs here, you'll find when you play this that a depressingly large number of these pieces have no score at all for eyeballs. You get nothing except filling in gaps for them. But this is a fun game, a fun 2-player game. It's often referred to as a welcoming game, a game that you teach non-board gamers how to play. And this edition is, of course, appropriate for Halloween. And I hope you enjoyed this little run-through of it. This has been Tea and Games, and I will see you next time round the table. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment, because YouTube apparently pays a lot of attention to those kind of things, and they will be nicer to me. The algorithm will be somewhat kinder if you just do like a little click or a comment or something. You don't even have to say much. Thanks a lot, and have a happy Halloween, everyone. Bye-bye.